Max Verstappen becomes a four-time world champion at the Las Vegas Grand Prix. Is anyone surprised? I'm not. But where does he fit in the all-timers? Today, I've got a special guest to discuss just that. Baxty, hello, sir.
Hello, mate. How's it going?
Good. What a surprise to see you here today.
I know it's been such a long time since I saw you.
So, big news. Max Verstappen becomes a four-time world champion. I know how much of a fan you are.
Mate, I love Max Verstappen. Like, oh my God, he's my favorite. No, no, no. Like, if you haven't seen me on the shakedown, you'll know that I'm not his biggest fan, but I also respect the hell out of him. But it's just like I can see the greatness. I just don't like some of your moves that you do on the track, particularly around sort of Austin and Mexico time. I thought that was a bit naughty. So but
Yeah,
can't deny he's had a great season and he fully deserves it. He is the most deserving of champion this year. Like I think he grabbed it by the scruff of the neck in Brazil and was just like, right, I've had enough now. I'm just gonna end it right here and now. Brilliant.
So, so this is the thing that has been taxing me for like the last few weeks because we knew that Max was going to win this title, especially after Brazil, which was let's not beat around the bush. That was the best individual performance of anybody this season, I think. But in terms of where this championship ranks, Max has now got four. There's hardly anyone that's got four. But in terms of where it ranks in his personal library, where do you think it stacks up?
I mean, I'll do the political answer of kind of weighing up the pros and cons, and then I'll give you my view. So it depends what you like, isn't it? Because I mean, if somebody's just like you love the skill of somebody just executing race after race after race and dominating, then you'd probably say 23 or 22 is the best, or you prefer the cut and thrust of competition. So you would look at 2021 or 2024, which is what Max has had to do. So that's where I think people will kind of sit and maybe make a decision. My view is competition trumps all. So as impressive as 2023 was, most of the races were just cakewalks for him and procession. I mean, we barely saw him in 2023, other than when he started on pole and crossed the line to win all those races. Um, it was it 19 race wins or something last year. It's just ridiculous. Like,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
I
it's
mean,
video
but
game settings, really,
but
isn't
as you
it?
say,
So,
on the back of a season where the car was freakishly dominant that year.
yeah, I've never seen a more dominant car than that, and I've seen some dominant Mercedes. I mean, in terms of just how it could just win almost every race, and because he was the only driver really capable of
Yeah,
winning,
agreed.
whereas
Agreed.
Mercedes had equally dominant cars, but they had two drivers, so you have more competition. So for me, I actually rate 2024 as his best
You do.
because I mean 2021, I don't want to bring that up, but there was the stinky ending, which is hard to avoid regardless of which side of the fence you sit on. And that ending will be debated from the until the end of time. It will always be that sort of sore sticking point that when when they're both retired, you'll kind of be like, yeah, but there was that one. But
Yeah.
2024, he built the lead a la Jenson Button in 2009. But what he didn't do, and what made it really impressive, was that he didn't really crumble under the pressure, whereas Jenson kind of stumbled across the line really until, well, he got to Brazil sort of on one leg and then kind of rediscovered his form in that race and won the championship. But Max was rock solid all the way throughout and face down competition, not just from Lando Norris, but the Ferraris were very quick and he kind of kept up with them. The Mercedes, when they could be bothered to be good, he could keep up with them. It was a very difficult, very taxing season for him, but he did the hard work early on and he made it count when it mattered. And yeah, he also delivered when it was, he was able to extend his lead in races that he probably shouldn't have done, and that's a sign of a true champion right there. Like it's an amazing performance.
Yeah, I mean, we've had this argument on this channel before, and the classic argument for this one is, well, Max had more to fight against in this season than he has in any other championship, right? So 22 and
Yeah,
23, I think, you know, both of those seasons, as much as it was Max that was pulling the performance out of the car. The performance that he could pull out of the car was just so much greater than what other teams had. In 23, he didn't even need a teammate to win the Constructors' Championship. That's how far ahead of the pack he was, right? This season's not been so straightforward. But one of the things that I think I've kind of settled on with Max is that he has sort of one sort of performance level, one sort of level in terms of how much better he is relative to everybody else. He's able to maintain that no matter what the situation is around him. So so Max in 2024, I think, was just as impressive relative to everybody else as he was in 2021 or 22 or 23. It's just the circumstances around that performance change all the time. But that then for me makes the circumstances more important. So it's
Yeah,
less about Max's performance, which is you know it's going to be blockbuster every time he sits his butt in the car. So the only way to judge which of his championships is the best is what the circumstances were that were presented to him. And look, I take the point that this season he had more of a challenge in terms of the car that was presented to him. Like it wasn't the all dominant, all conquering, get out of my way RB19. But having said that, it was on average the quickest car across the entire season with on super times, right? And even when it wasn't, the challenge that he got was from more than one driver. So it wasn't as if McLaren suddenly were the quickest car and they had no competition for the rest of the season. As you said, Mercedes won 3 races, and in fact, Mercedes have won a race at McLaren's least competitive race this season since Miami, I would have argued. Ferrari were right in there as well, even at the beginning. And we know that at an individual level, like the driver challenge wasn't quite the same. That's why I keep coming back to, all right, yes, there was a sticky ending, but 2021 I thought just showed a, like, for me, that was still like a pure championship. There was more. There was everything that Max and Red Bull had against everything that Lewis and Mercedes had, with no drop off in performance particularly. Um, so for me overall, that was a better championship.
yeah, fair enough. I mean, it's definitely a toss up between the two, but I just can't look beyond the ending, and that's
Oh,
probably the Lewis fan in me. But I mean, Max was incredible in 21. He was absolutely. He
yeah.
never let up and just was on it every single session, every single qualifying, every single race. But yeah, I just can't look beyond that ending, mate. I really
Oh,
can't. Yeah, and I think the thing for me with this year is I think Max has kind of had a double-edged way of proving himself. Like in some respects, he's actually gone down in estimations because you had some of his fans and people saying, "Oh, you could put Max in a Haas or a Williams or a Sauber and he'd win races because he's that good." Well, no, he's not that good. No one is that good. I mean, you would have to build a machine to be that good, and the machines they're currently trying to drive cars are not that good. So when he's not, the Red Bull hasn't been there, he's not been able to win races, and circumstances are that other
yeah.
teams have got quicker cars. But he's
Mm.
also gone up in my estimations because he's been able to do it in a very different way to 2021. 2021, he knew he had one guy to beat, whereas this time he had two Ferraris, two McLarens,
Mm.
maybe a Mercedes from time to time, and he didn't quite know where the challenge was going to come from. But he was consistently putting himself in the right place and asking the right questions of his title rivals to be said, "You want to win this championship? Well, you got to finish here, and you're not finishing here at the moment because I'm ahead of you." Um, and I think the biggest thing that he's really shown this year is his qualifying. His qualifying this year has been immense. Like he always had the ability to hook together incredible laps, but I always felt like overall a season, I felt like there were drivers that were quicker than him. So like Charles, Lewis, and George, and I always felt like they were the top three, and then kind of Max was kind of just that little bit below, but he's gone up one into that elite qualifying tier because he has put some performances out of that Red Bull, put that car on position where it shouldn't be, like getting front rows and just causing problems for those trying to catch him because he's just there. And
And
his
there
qualifying has been
wasn't
so good this year.
and there wasn't anything. there wasn't anything last year that made you sort of think that, like Monaco 23, for example.
No, don't get me wrong. As I said, very good qualifier, but there were races in 23 where you think, oh, well, he should be on pole all the time, but he wasn't. And I think if you think of Sebastian Vettel, the other four-time Red Bull world champion, like you pretty much knew when he had a dominant car, he was going to be on pole because he was just that good over one lap. Whereas Max, okay, not saying he's bad, but it's
Mm.
just, when you've got Charles Leclerc in a Ferrari capable of challenging for pole, sometimes it's not going to go your way, and but he has outperformed the car more this year than I think he has done in previous years. Like Monaco last year was an exception. Suzuka last year was an exception.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Oh,
but you always felt like he was doing what the car should do, whereas this year I think he's been outperforming the car more. I probably didn't explain that so well earlier, but
yeah. As in, okay. As in, yes, there are probably a few races where you thought perhaps Max shouldn't have got pole. Imola is the one that comes to mind, probably the most, and Austria potentially as well. But I don't know. For me, this still comes back to the fact that that element of Max asking questions of his title rivals that they can't answer. I feel like that's something that I think Lando Norris put this quite nicely, where he said that there's stuff that Max is doing that makes him the target, makes him the best in the world right now, right? Even if I think he said that even if he had had a perfect season, he still wouldn't have necessarily beaten Max Verstappen this year because it's just like the relentlessness of the excellence is so good,
mm,
right? It's just that you know that like the heavens could open, like the fires of hell could open up beneath you, and Max Verstappen would still pull out a stellar performance. It's like
yeah,
nothing phases him at all.
yeah. No, I
Uh,
agree, and like very few drivers can match that. I think Lewis in 21 did match it. Like
yes,
he
yeah. I
did
agree with
match
that.
it.
I agree with
Um,
that.
but that's because Lewis has got the experience to do that, whereas Lando is trying to match a level of performance that he's kind of seen in the distance, but he's never seen it up close. And now he's seen it up close. I don't personally think he can get there based on what we've seen this season, but he might prove me wrong.
Yeah, I don't
But
think so
whether
either.
he can do it or not remains another question. Whereas the only guy I think at the moment that you can definitively say could match it, I think he proved it yesterday that he could is Lewis. Um, I think George Russell can. I think Charles Leclerc can. I think Oscar Piastri can, but they've got to experience it and they've got to prove it.
Yeah, yeah. I guess the odd one out in the three that you've just mentioned is Piastri because I think Leclerc and Russell in their junior years as karters have all gone up against Max and they know a little bit about how he races and how he is as quick as he is.
Mm.
Whether or not they are the complete package that Max is and the complete package that I mean, can you argue that he was like that as soon as he walked into Formula One? Probably not. I think,
No, no.
probably not. I think 2018 first half of the season definitely proves that there were still some rough edges there, right? Um, but you can certainly see in the way that Charles and George race against him that it's not the temerity or the timidity, I guess, that Lando has had in wheel to wheel contact, right? That there's a lot more leeway given by Lando, as you say, probably because he just hasn't experienced it before. But uh, it's a tough one, right? Because yes, he hasn't had that experience, but he also like how many opportunities are you gonna get
That's the
um
thing. Like, was this year the year for
the
him to
year?
to do it? Like
Yeah.
Oscar Piastri's getting better. I will. If you've watched the shakedown, you'll know that I predicted Oscar would probably win the championship next year. But then since I uttered those words into existence, he's been absolutely useless.
Yes, yeah, I know.
But then
Poor
you've
old
got
Oscar.
Charles and Lewis in the Ferrari. It's all
Yeah,
going to
there's
be great.
there's a lot of dynamics for next year, and I think at some point we'll have to do a 2025 preview, which is going to take probably the entire winter break to cover. So there's
Yeah.
just too much to go through. Um, okay, so final word about Max and his fourth world championship. Um, has this particular title, the winning of it, changed your thoughts about where he fits in your own sort of personal
Oh yeah,
greatest of all time
100%.
list?
100%. Yeah.
Up or
So,
down, Baxley?
oh, up. Oh, yeah, I mean, I'd be a brave man to have just said all of that and go, oh, he's actually gone down. No, he's definitely gone up. I had him at 9 in my top 10 before, and I've moved him up to 6. And there's a variety of factors behind that. I mean, for example, the three he's gone ahead of are Lauda, Clark, and Stewart.
Wow.
Not in that. I think it now goes Lauda, Stewart, Clark,
But Lauda,
Verstappen.
Clark, and Stewart.
Yeah.
Oof.
Now, the reason I say that is because I have a bias towards Max because I have seen him. I've seen his career unfold. I wasn't even born when the other three were racing, but I understand the impact that they had, the levels that they reached, and I mean, Jackie was kind of the definitive driver of the late 60s and early 70s.
Yeah, I'd
Like
agree
you
with that.
think of Jackie, he broke the records, he set the
Yeah,
standard
yeah,
for people to chase. So
yeah. It was very much the
it's
Michael Schumacher of his time, I think, wasn't he?
exactly.
Yeah,
And F1 wouldn't be where it is today without him when
yeah,
his push for safety as well.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's just such an important driver. Yeah, Jim Clark, everyone from that era says he was the best, but I only get
yeah. You
grainy
never saw him.
footage.
Yeah,
Never saw him.
yeah,
So that I
yeah,
am biased towards Max in that respect. In much the same way that I'm biased towards Lewis, because like, I knew who Schumi was and I saw races with Schumi, but I wasn't like clued in all the time. And
yeah.
Senna was I was 2 when Senna died, so I never saw him up close on my TV. Whereas I've seen Max and Lewis, and I can judge them fully.
Yeah, it's a tough one, especially when you haven't like had the first hand haven't had the first hand knowledge. But Max even for me is starting to really sort of exert himself on that top 10, top 5 kind of area because I'm running out of drivers where I can say he is definitively not as good as them or they have done something so much more special. He's ticking off all the boxes that make sort of really fantastic champions. But there was another story from the Las Vegas Grand Prix that we probably should cover, and that is that cometh the cold, cometh the Mercedes.
Oh mate,
How did you ingest that?
it was glorious. A little bit of a what if there with
Oh yeah,
Lewis and his awful qualifying on in Q3 on Saturday. But it was a magnificent drive. Yeah, the flip side of that is we got that magnificent drive on the Saturday night, Sunday morning. Still
oh it's
complete by
Sunday
all
for me. It
accounts.
was definitely Sunday for
Yeah,
me.
Sunday for me as well. But yeah, it's
Yeah,
depending on where you watch it. It was an unbelievable drive up from P10, and then he dropped back down to P8, and then worked his way through the field again. Um, and showing that if you give him the car, and he proved a lot of doubters wrong, and he showed that Father Time has not caught up with him. I was kind of thinking, is this it?
Hmm.
Is this it for Lewis? Has the undefeated Father Time finally landed one on him? But he still got it. He has still got it, and that is incredible to see. And it shows that if Ferrari do give him a car worthy of his talents next year, then I think he can be competitive. And I'm reassured by that. I still need to see him in the Ferrari before I make full judgment, but I am now leaning more towards he's still there. His driving is not an issue compared to how I was before the race, where I was like, I'm not entirely sure. But George, magnificent, did not put a foot wrong all weekend. He was so unbelievably fast. He all the way through the race, I don't think you ever doubted that he was going to win.
Hmm.
And I just think it was a majestic performance by him and his first true win where people will have no doubts about it. It's just he delivered an absolute statement win, and it was him showing Mercedes, you were right to place your faith in me as the number one driver for next year alongside Antonelli, and I can win you championships. Like I'm now 100% certain that Mercedes will look at George and go, if we give him a car that can compete, he can go and win us races. And you haven't been able to say that before about George.
It really?
Give him if you put the circumstances, if you give him a circumstance in which he can win a race, then yeah, he can do it. He was showing it in Brazil
Other way around, man.
until
Like was it really in that much doubt that if he had a car underneath him that he wasn't going to be able to bring it home? Like I agree with you that like there have been races like Canada, for example, was a
Yep.
classic one
Singapore
where
last year.
Singapore last year, yeah, I agree with that. But in the same way that I'm happy to give Charles Leclerc a bit of a bye for one or two mistakes here and there, like I don't think that like I don't think I've ever really been in any doubt that even if he had a you know France 2022 that you couldn't still pull off a Monza
Oh,
2024.
absolutely. No, I'm not. I'm not a George Russell hater. I love the guy. I'm a sort of. I'm not a member of his fan club, but I'm a big George Russell fan. But it's the difference between we can trust this guy, but can he get us the results? To we know he can get the results. Like they know with Lewis, they've known for years. We give Lewis a car, we set him up right. We get everything in the right place. He can deliver us a win, a podium, or a really strong result. With George, you've kind of been edging that way, but I think this and actually Brazil as well, they just got undone by an unlucky strategy call. He showed he can absolutely
Yeah.
deliver, and the one thing left for him to do now is to do that under championship pressure, which I think we're probably a year and a bit away from seeing that. If Mercedes get 26 right, I'm not anticipating them to be near championship contention next year.
Like I have to say, like I'm the same as you. I'm not like 100% on the George Russell bandwagon, but I feel like George gets used a lot. Like his performances get underplayed a lot. Um, because it's always in relation to Lewis. So it tends to be that if George performs well, Lewis can't be that good, which I think undersells how good George is. And if Lewis beats George, well, okay, well, we just knew that because George isn't really that good anyway. Or he's been overrated in so many ways. And that for me doesn't really make any sense. Um, and I'm talking about George first because we'll come to Lewis properly in a second, right? Because I think there's some stuff to talk about with him as well. But the conundrum, or the conundrum with George is that you have that unbelievable explosive one lap pace, right? Well, it's not even explosive because I think it's a thinking man's qualifying lap, if you know what I mean. Like he really understands how to prep the tires. Like there's a stark difference between the way Lewis does it and the way that George does it. And George is kind of showing over the course of this season that the way he preps his tires and the way he brings them in gives him confidence in the rear end of his car that Lewis just hasn't got. Right. And that takes a bit of nous to understand, right? Um, and to kind of deny that he's had that the whole time, I think is underplaying him. I agree with you that the race results haven't always been there. Like he's definitely had a big mistake in him, like a race ending mistake. And when things go wrong for him, they go wrong in a big way. Um, but but how many races this season that Lewis won, right, was George out of contention for? Like both of them.
Yeah, I mean, Silverstone, I think even if he hadn't had the DNF, I think Lewis was going to win that
Yeah, I agree with that.
regardless. And obviously, Belgium, he produced an unbelievable drive, but with an illegal
The illegal
car.
car. Yeah.
How much of that was the illegal car? How much of that was him? It's, as always with these things, down the middle, a bit of both. Um, but yeah, and obviously he did get lucky in Austria, let's be honest, but that
Yep.
was
No, he did. He did.
preparation meets opportunity.
Correct.
Yeah, he put himself in the position to take advantage of if Max and Lando ran into each other, and on that day they did. Um, so you asked a question on shifting where you were like, is he the most underrated driver? And I think actually he probably is because you have one fan base who just want to do him down all the time because he's had the temerity to beat his seven-time champion teammate in his own team, even though it completely forgets
Yeah,
the
like it
entirety of
exactly
Mercedes.
a
Yeah.
like it's a sign of impoliteness to beat
Yeah.
Lewis Hamilton in the same team. That to me
Yeah.
doesn't make sense.
And it doesn't make sense at all, and Lewis thrives on the competition. Lewis loves it. They haven't gone head to head that often
Yeah.
because either one of them's had a bad qualifying or the car just isn't there. But Yeah, I would have loved to have seen them have proper battles for race wins, and yeah, the only time we've really seen them go head to head was well Brazil 22, but Lewis had a slightly damaged car, so he couldn't impose himself properly. And then were Japan last year, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Okay, so that for me, I think is a nice segue into talking about young Mr. Hamilton because, like, is the reason that they're not having these battles on track because Lewis has just massively underperformed in qualifying this year. Like, what has happened?
Yeah, Lewis's qualifying has been. Let's be honest, it's been crap for two
It
years.
has.
It's been really bad.
I'd say 18 months. I thought the second half of 2023 was when George really started to kick in and after a
Yeah.
bit of a lull, he was just knocking them
I
out
mean,
easy.
George didn't have a great season last year, and he's
Mm.
definitely stepped up his
Yeah,
game from
yeah,
last
yeah,
year.
yeah, yeah,
Whereas
yeah.
Lewis had a really good season last year, but has definitely had a bit of a
Dipped a
come
little
down. Now
bit, hasn't
that
he? Yeah.
part of that is Ferrari and McLaren improving. Part of that as well is just the car. I don't think is as good because they're still year one of a new concept, whereas they're all year two, year three of a new concept. So that's partly why Mercedes
Yep.
are behind. But yeah, Lewis's qualifying has not been good. I mean, it depends who you absorb. Yeah, you'll have some fans tell you it's sabotage. You'll have other fans tell you he's washed, and I just think it's he is not comfortable with that car over one lap. We've seen that he's still got the speed. He can still deliver decent results in qualifying, but for whatever reason, the first mistake, the lockup, informed what then happened with the second mistake. I
Because
think if he has,
yeah, I agree.
he was pushing too hard to try and heat his tires up and trying to get himself into a position where he can then go for pole position. Which, to be honest, I think he probably would have got because he was rapid in Q1 and Q2. But he got a little bit desperate, I think, which is unusual for Lewis. But I think because he's been so starved of success and he wants to leave on the right terms, he just overplayed his hand a little bit, and it cost him all the lap time.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he changed his approach in Q3 and did two
Yeah,
prep laps, or did a prep lap before his push lap, which Mercedes had not been doing up until that point. And
yeah,
like it was an unnecessary added bit of tire warming that I don't think that car needed. It took away part of the advantage that they had in that qualifying session. And I totally agree with you. It's sort of gone up and down a little bit, hasn't it? That he's like there are so many factors in this. Like he's in the final year of a contract that he's had with Mercedes since 2013. It's been 11 years they've been together. Um, and they've given him a dud of a car where he can't actually win a championship with it. So in the same kind of Prost way, where I'm not going to get out of bed. Well, it's not as bad as that, but like there's a bit of a subtle mental switch that goes off, I think, where even if they don't realize it, they're suddenly just not working at the same level. Because you saw what happens when there's a chance of a good result. You saw it in Silverstone, the leave me to it, man. I know what I'm doing. When you hear that something special is going to happen. And it was the
yeah.
same even in Vegas when he was chasing down George Russell. When there's a chance of a result, he'll go for it. But I thought that was a microcosm of Lewis, like throughout this season. That as soon as he realised that he couldn't do it, and he had that off, and his tyres went off, that's it. I'm out of the game again. And he dropped back by sort of 3 or 4 seconds again, didn't he? By the end of the race. Now, that was always going to happen. His tyres were
He was
always going to
working a lot
time
harder
out.
than George was. Like,
Yeah,
I mean, George, okay, when he picked up the pace, wasn't quicker than Lewis, but he still had enough in hand, I think, to just keep Lewis behind. I think if
yeah,
Lewis had kept those tyres in and had got close to him, got to his rear wing, I don't think he's going past unless he basically puts him out wide. But I just
yeah,
don't think there was the time for Lewis to be able to
yeah.
do that.
But I agree with you that the performances are there. There is the potential to have those performances. But where I said that Max just maintains the same level, wants to be the quickest in every single session and just do the best, do the best in every situation. Lewis is happier to sit back when the opportunity isn't there and really bring the big stuff when there's an opportunity to do it. And that excites me, but worries me a little bit as well about Ferrari because I mean, it excites me because it's a new opportunity. He's going to come out and motivated, but as Fernando Alonso always says, like you know what kind of season you're going to have from the first test. And if he turns up in Barcelona or Bahrain or wherever the first test is going to be, do we know yet? I don't know.
Bahrain, I think.
Is it?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, if he turns up there and Ferrari have a bit of a dud, is the Lewis of this season going to be the one that turns up for the rest of the season, or is it going to be the opposite that like they have something to them. They have more of a car that they've had towards the end of this season, and we get the Lewis of 2023 even, where he was fully motivated to get that third in the championship and bring home big results. I just don't know which
I
one I'm going to get.
think because it's his first season, I think you're more likely to see a really motivated Lewis because he's going to want to. I mean, he will go to that team thinking he can challenge for the championship given the performance of Ferrari at the moment, and he's going to hope that they can carry that over into next year, which, yeah, is not an unreasonable thing to expect. But also, he's going to have one eye on 26 because he's got what, a 2, 3 year contract.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Big opportunity for Ferrari to take a further jump forward and potentially be the dominant team. I mean, Ferrari haven't been the dominant team, since the 2000s. They're going to want to get back there if they can get the engine right and get this active aero right. Then who knows? And so he's going to want to make sure that he's got his team fully in place and working around him and with him and towards him that they can hit the ground running in 26 and be ready to go. So he's going to have absolutely be thinking he can win next year, but also he's going to want to establish the relationship to potentially set up 26 as being another chance if he doesn't get it next year to get it in 26.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, here's hoping, man. Here's hoping.
Yeah.
Whatever you think of Lewis as a driver, as a person, um, can't really deny that a race is always a bit more exciting when Lewis has got the bit between his teeth. And I hope we're going to see a whole heap of that next year. And on that bombshell, I think it's time to call it a day on this one. Baxty, thanks so much for being on, mate. Absolute pleasure as always.
No, thanks for
Thank you for
having
your
me on,
insights.
mate. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, mate, hopefully it's not the last time. Um, as usual, if you liked what we're doing here, please subscribe. You'll see Ammar again a little bit later this week, hopefully. Please drop us a comment. I'll read every single one and we'll reply to as many as we possibly can. And we'll see you guys in the next one.